There are crimes so twisted, so deeply buried, they don't just escape justice, they fracture reality itself. These aren't ordinary murders. These are cases where evidence disappears, jurors vanish, and victims are remembered only in fragments. From whispering killers to erased court records, something darker than silence surrounds these investigations. Why were they hidden? Who, or what, wanted them forgotten? These are 5 true crime cases that shattered reality and vanished from records, and they were never meant to be uncovered. Welcome to Unsolved Archives, where we delve into the hidden, the mysterious, and the unanswered. Share your thoughts in the comments. Your insight could be the key to unlocking the truth. The house on Ryer's Fork. In the fading light of a Tennessee evening, the town of Ryer's Fork sat still, blanketed in that quiet, rural silence that feels both peaceful and uneasy. With fewer than 800 residents and just one sheriff for a 20-mile radius, strange occurrences didn't happen often, but when they did, they lingered for generations. On October 4, 1987, at precisely 3:12 a.m., a disoriented man named Carl Eller stumbled into the Hollow Rock Sheriff's office, barefoot, bloody, and mumbling nonsense. His clothes were singed. His eyes, wide and distant, didn't seem to register the room around him. When Sheriff Rick Hayden asked him what had happened, Carl only said, "She melted. I told her not to speak the ritual. But she melted." The police found Carl's home, an old 2-bedroom cottage off an unpaved access road, almost 20 minutes down the ridge. What they saw puzzled and disturbed every deputy on scene. There was no furniture, no food in the kitchen, no dishes in the sink. The entire house had been stripped down to bare walls and splintered floorboards. Every single light fixture had been removed, leaving behind black sockets like empty eye sockets in a skull. But the most troubling feature was in the kitchen, a single massive scorch mark, perfectly round, about 6 feet wide, centered near the old wood stove. The surrounding boards were warped, and the edges glowed faintly orange, as if recently scorched. No body, no blood, just heat, ash, and the lingering smell of burnt copper. Forensics found no sign of foul play, no accelerants, and no evidence of an explosion or electrical malfunction. There were no heat sources capable of producing that burn. And no neighbors, none within half a mile, had heard or seen anything. Carl was taken in for psychiatric evaluation. Under sedation, he began muttering fragments. The 4th tape. She shouldn't have said the 5th line. The veil is thin in autumn. According to the attending psychiatrist, Carl spoke of rituals of self-forgetting and memory extraction. The man was deemed unfit to stand trial for any potential charges and was committed to the Knoxville State Hospital for long-term care. Then came the discovery of the tapes. 2 weeks after Carl's admission, a local hunter exploring the woods behind the Eller home stumbled upon a waterproof lockbox buried beneath a collapsed stone well. Inside were 4 VHS tapes, each labeled with a single symbol carved into black plastic. No titles, no dates. The sheriff's office played the tapes on an old RCA television behind locked doors. The footage was grainy, handheld, and erratic, likely shot over months or even years. The first tape showed Carl and his wife, Mary Ann, engaging in what appeared to be psychological experiments, guided meditations, deep hypnosis sessions, and strange memory recall tests involving mirrors and inverted speech. Mary Ann would repeat nonsensical mantras backwards, then describe seeing the gray face in her dreams. On the second tape, she begins forgetting major events, her childhood, her wedding day. Her voice loses its tone. Her movements become slow and synchronized with Carl's, like choreographed puppetry. The third tape turned disturbing. Mary Ann wears a blindfold and recites something from a page Carl never shows to the camera. Her voice takes on a rhythm, a cadence like that of ritual chanting. In the background, whispers can be heard, though neither Carl nor Mary Ann reacts to them. Carl pauses the recording at one point and resumes moments later, visibly shaken. The room is darker. A strange buzzing sound underlies everything. But the 4th tape was blank. Nothing but static. Then came the fire. Just 3 nights after the sheriff's office locked the tapes in evidence storage, a fire erupted at the station. Investigators later said the source was untraceable, with no accelerant or electrical cause. The fire was oddly contained. It destroyed only the evidence room. Nothing else in the building suffered damage. No water damage, no smoke damage. Just one scorched vault. The tapes were lost. In 1993, Carl Eller vanished from Knoxville State Hospital. No record of escape. No breach of security. He was in his room at 8 p.m. for check-in. By morning, his bed was empty and cold. His file was missing from hospital records. Surveillance tapes for that night were corrupted. Following his disappearance, a pattern emerged. Residents near the old Eller home began reporting strange dreams, recurring visions of someone standing in their kitchens at night, whispering numbers. 3, 9, 15, 5. The dreams would always end the same, the figure melting, their flesh dripping like wax, leaving behind scorched floorboards. 2 families that moved into the property afterward didn't last more than 6 weeks. One family left in the middle of the night and refused to speak to reporters. The second left a note on the door. The house remembers. By 1997, the property had been abandoned, fenced off, and listed as non-habitable. In 2002, unknown arsonists burned it to the ground. No suspects were ever identified. To this day, the burn mark in the kitchen remains a local legend. Locals claim that if you stand at its center on an autumn night and speak a specific phrase, no one agrees on what it is, you'll forget who you are. Completely. Permanently. Not just your name, but the concept of yourself. What truly happened in the house on Ryer's Fork? Was it madness? A forgotten trauma? Or something far older and buried in the folds of forgotten rituals? The sheriff who first responded, Rick Hayden, died in 2006. His last words, according to his nurse, were, "She melted. And I saw it too." The whispering bus driver. It started as whispers. Not the metaphorical kind, the literal ones. On the brisk morning of February 12, 2001, a third-grade student named Tyler Green told his mother that the bus driver had whispered something weird to him. She laughed it off, thinking he was playing pretend again. But later that week, other children at Eaton Elementary in Lansing, Michigan, began telling their parents the same thing. Mr. Dempsey had been whispering strange things during the morning rides, things no child should know. "He said my dad had a sister who drowned," one child claimed. "He told me my mom was adopted and her real mom lives in Arizona," said another. The school did what schools do. They held a quiet, internal review. Jerry Dempsey had been driving that route for 15 years with no complaints. A widower in his 50s, he was polite, punctual, and reserved. He read detective novels in his downtime and volunteered to shovel snow for elderly neighbors. Background checks came back clean. But the complaints didn't stop. Over the course of 3 weeks, at least 14 students claimed that Dempsey whispered deeply personal secrets to them. Not just about their families, but about themselves. Things they had never told anyone. Fears. Dreams. One girl said he whispered the names of 3 dolls she had lost when she was 5 and then told her, "They're buried under your basement stairs." That one proved true. Her parents excavated part of the basement and found 3 moldy, water-damaged dolls in a sealed wooden box. When confronted, Dempsey calmly denied everything. He looked Principal Whitley in the eye and said, "I don't talk to the children. Not directly. Not anymore." He smiled faintly, as if revealing a joke no one else understood. There was something unsettling about his composure, like he wasn't hiding guilt, but hiding comfort in something only he could see. Parents demanded action. The school district suspended Dempsey pending an investigation. Meanwhile, rumors swirled across Lansing. Some believed he had psychic abilities. Others whispered about cult connections. But when the FBI stepped in, yes, the FBI, it wasn't for the whispers. It was for the confession. On March 3, 2001, Dempsey walked into the Lansing field office unprompted and requested to speak with someone about the ones nobody found. For 5 hours, he detailed 17 unsolved murders, spanning 3 decades and 5 states, from Louisiana to Ohio. The descriptions were precise: victim names, dates, burial sites, methods of disposal. He gave details about each victim's last meal, what they wore, what their final words were. But here's the thing: none of them existed. The FBI cross-referenced his information with local, state, and federal databases. No matching victims. No missing person reports. No DNA matches. No fingerprints. It was as if the people he described had never lived. Even stranger? Forensic psychologists noted inconsistencies in his narrative that suggested not fabrication, but misalignment with reality. The names he provided didn't exist, but some closely resembled real victims from other time periods, different regions. One analyst said, "It's like he's pulling memories from overlapping lives." As if someone tried to erase the originals and didn't quite finish the job. That theory gained traction when, a week later, FBI offices in Michigan received 3 anonymous letters. Each was written in red ink on yellowed paper. Each contained coordinates and a warning. Don't dig too deep. Some graves stay closed for a reason. The Bureau sent teams to the locations: a field outside Erie, Pennsylvania; a dried-up riverbed near Bloomington, Indiana; an overgrown lot behind an abandoned drive-in theater in Kentucky. 5 shallow graves were found. 5 skeletons. Each site revealed bodies that had been buried for decades. Each victim had a toy frog placed beside them. Not one matched Dempsey's original descriptions. The public never learned about the frogs. That detail was redacted from press releases. But those who worked the case never forgot. The image of half-buried amphibian toys beside human remains was too strange, too deliberate. Theories multiplied. Some speculated Dempsey was a vessel, some kind of human antenna for the forgotten. Others believed he was delusional and somehow stumbled upon real grave sites by accident, guided by twisted subconscious intuition. A few agents on the case even began experiencing strange phenomena: lucid dreams of unfamiliar victims, cryptic phrases whispered while falling asleep, phantom scents of river water or burning plastic. Dempsey was held without bail. His trial date was set for October 2001. But he never made it that far. On June 29, prison guards found him hanging by his bedsheet. The official cause of death: suicide. But the oddest detail came from his suicide note, a short, single sentence written over and over. "The dead don't whisper forever. They scream, eventually." After his death, reports of strange dreams among the investigative team stopped. The anonymous letters ceased. But one last message arrived, exactly 1 year later, on the same date Dempsey died. This one wasn't mailed. It was hand-delivered to the front desk of FBI headquarters in a sealed envelope with no return address. Inside, a single photograph. It showed a group of children on a school bus. Dempsey was in the driver's seat, turning around. But his face was blurred, like someone had painted over it in fog. On each of the children's laps sat a tiny, identical toy frog. No one could trace the image. No metadata. No fingerprints. The bus number didn't match any known district ID. To this day, law enforcement officials debate what Dempsey was. A killer? A prophet? A man lost between timelines? The children he whispered to? Most have grown up. A few reportedly suffer from long-term dissociative episodes, triggered by the smell of bus exhaust or the sound of gravel under tires. And every year, on March 3rd, someone leaves a plastic frog on the steps of the Lansing FBI office. No one has ever seen who does it. The Burned Courtroom Files. In the arid heart of Valencia County, New Mexico, the town of Estancia kept to itself. Life was slow, quiet, shaped by heat waves and distant thunderclouds. But in 1994, something happened that shattered the fragile order of its justice system, and left behind a puzzle no one could explain. The case was known locally as the Cement Cross Murders. A contractor named Harold Hal Rusk had been arrested after police discovered 4 human skulls buried in a concrete foundation of a strip mall construction site. The remains were charred. One had its jaw broken in a pattern that matched a large steel tamping tool used in pouring foundation blocks. The case was explosive. Rusk was a respected figure in Estancia. Church-going. Donated to youth sports. Nobody wanted to believe it. Investigators believed Rusk had used his construction sites as a cover for years, selecting victims with no immediate family, drifters, undocumented laborers, local runaways, and entombing them in the very buildings people walked over daily. At least 3 more potential sites were identified before the trial began. The evidence against him was staggering: dental matches, tool mark impressions, and a bloody glove found at one of the sites with partial DNA linking him to the scene. The courtroom was packed on day 1 of the trial. Reporters, families, even former co-workers. Judge Emily Hargrove presided with the stern dignity of someone who knew her town needed to believe in the justice system. Then came the fire. On the night of April 2nd, just 4 days into the trial, the Estancia County Courthouse was engulfed in flames. The blaze was surgical, not uncontrolled or chaotic, as accidental fires often are. It burned one specific wing of the building, the Judicial Records and Evidence Annex. Everything inside was destroyed. The original physical evidence for the Rusk case, gone. Crime scene photos, the bloodied glove, skull x-rays, plaster molds. Even the signed witness testimonies. Fire investigators later determined the fire had multiple ignition points, suggesting arson, but there were no footprints, no fingerprints, no signs of forced entry. Judge Hargrove, desperate to salvage the case, ordered a recovery of backups. Court clerks claimed most files had been duplicated and stored off-site at the Estancia Archive Facility, a dusty concrete building on the edge of town that smelled of mildew and forgotten paper. When deputies retrieved the Rusk backups, they were stunned. Inside the sealed evidence boxes were no reports, no photos, no legal briefs. Instead, each file folder contained children's drawings, crayon scribbles on aged paper, images of stick figures with no eyes, homes with no doors, strange symbols resembling runes or crop circles. One drawing showed a figure, clearly Rusk, holding a hammer over a faceless child. Another had the words, "The ground remembers," scrawled in red marker over and over across the page. It made no sense. Dozens of folders had been altered or swapped. The only digital copies available on the court's now-defunct computer network were corrupted beyond recovery. When they tried to scan the drawings for fingerprints or DNA, the documents turned brittle, almost ash-like, and disintegrated under pressure. Panic set in. Prosecutors scrambled to rebuild the case from memory, from witness recollection, but the legal framework was too fragile. Defense attorneys pounced, claiming evidence tampering and constitutional violations. With no physical proof left, Judge Hargrove reluctantly declared a mistrial. Hal Rusk was released. He left the courthouse in silence, staring at the sky like a man who expected lightning to strike him. Reporters followed, cameras rolling. He never said a word to them, not even to deny the charges. Just that eerie, empty stare. He moved out of Estancia 2 weeks later. Bought a small property in the nearby town of Moriarty. Lived alone. Never rebuilt his business. Locals whispered that he buried something in his backyard, something large and carefully shaped. No one ever got close enough to find out. Then, in 1997, a family bought an old ranch house just 2 blocks from where Rusk had once lived. While digging in their backyard for a garden plot, they uncovered a sealed plastic container filled with rotting paperwork and microfilm reels. Some of the paperwork bore the Estancia County Court stamp. It was the Rusk case. Unburned. Untouched. Full documentation, complete with evidence logs, photo prints, and handwritten notes. As if someone had known the fire would happen, and saved the case just in time. The microfilm contained something else entirely. A reel of grainy footage. Silent. Time-stamped 1974. It showed a much younger Hal Rusk on a construction site. He's alone. Digging. A woman walks up behind him and hands him something, a cloth bundle. He opens it. Inside is a human skull. Rusk doesn't react. He simply nods and begins digging faster. The woman walks off-screen. A frame later, she's gone. Police reviewed the film dozens of times. There were no camera crews on that site in 1974. No known filming scheduled. No known identity for the woman. Rusk's company didn't even officially operate until 1978. The footage was handed over to federal agents. The container and paperwork were taken into evidence. But the family who found it, they vanished a year later, packed their bags and left town overnight. The house was left unlocked. A pot of stew still warm on the stove. Their car still parked in the driveway. The only clue left behind was a single page from a notebook found on the kitchen table. It read, "The drawings weren't made by children. They were warnings." Today, no one in Estancia speaks Rusk's name. Judge Hargrove retired in 2001 and now lives in isolation, refusing interviews. When asked about the case by a reporter, she reportedly said, "We tried to build justice on cursed ground. The foundation cracked, and something got in." As for Rusk, he was found dead in his home in 2008. Natural causes. A heart attack, they said. But pinned to his chest was a single sheet of notebook paper. It was one of the children's drawings from the archive files, now crisp and vivid as if newly drawn. It showed a courthouse burning. The Monday Murders. Spokane, Washington, cool, rainy, and forgettable on most maps, was a city that lived quietly, its crimes small-scale and its tragedies few. That changed in late 2013, when it became the site of one of the most unsettling killing sprees in modern memory. Not because of its brutality, though it was brutal. Not because of the victims, though they were many. But because of its precision. It began on Monday, September 9, 2013, at exactly 2:36 a.m. A woman named Danielle Ross, 28, was found dead in her apartment. Her throat had been cut with surgical precision, the wound clean, deep, and bloodless, almost as if the heart had stopped before the cut was made. There were no signs of forced entry. Her alarm clock was blinking 2:36, frozen by an unexplained short in the wiring. On her chest, neatly placed, was a small green plastic toy frog. At first, detectives treated it as an isolated, bizarre homicide. There was no clear motive. No struggle. Nothing stolen. But exactly 7 days later, on Monday, September 16th, the second body was found. Jason Lum, 35. A bar manager. Dead in his office chair with the same throat wound. Alarm clock frozen at 2:36 a.m. Toy frog on his chest. Week 3, an elderly woman named Clara Mendoza. Same wound. Same frog. By week 4, panic had set in. Media dubbed it the Monday Murders. Residents locked their doors, bought firearms, installed floodlights. But it didn't matter. Whoever the killer was, they came without sound, without trace. Always on Monday, always at 2:36 a.m., always a frog. The victims had nothing in common. Different races, ages, careers, social circles. No shared political views, no religious affiliations. The only tenuous connection was that all had once lived within a 2-mile radius of the now-defunct River's Edge Psychiatric Hospital, closed since 1999 after an internal abuse scandal. The hospital had treated hundreds over its 20-year history, but all records were sealed. Still, one investigative journalist, Nadine Toft, managed to secure leaked intake forms for 1994. She found that all 5 current victims had family members, siblings, parents, or children, who had been treated at River's Edge in that same year. All were listed under the same primary physician, Dr. Morris Halberd. Halberd was a name that hadn't surfaced in over a decade. After the hospital closed, he disappeared. Retired, perhaps. Or buried. His license had quietly expired, and attempts to trace his residence led nowhere. But one of the final entries in the leaked records was particularly strange. It listed not a patient's name, but a code. FROG, Subject Class E. The entry included the initials of all 5 victims' relatives, dated the same day, March 13, 1994. There were no diagnosis notes. No treatments. Just a scribbled line. Monarch sequence initiated. Ensure reset triggers remain dormant. Nadine published her findings online. The post went viral. Conspiracy forums exploded with theories about MK Ultra descendants, sleeper agents, chemical reprogramming. But before Nadine could go on air with a major network, she was found dead. Monday, October 14, 2:36 a.m. Same wound. Same frog. The city was now paralyzed. Police launched overnight patrols. Surveillance drones flew over neighborhoods. Helicopters buzzed the streets. But no footage ever captured anyone entering or leaving the crime scenes. Then something strange happened on week 8. No murder. The silence was almost worse than the killings. At 3:05 a.m., 911 received a call from a blocked number. The voice was male, trembling, hoarse. They've gone quiet. It's over. The frogs are gone. They found peace. Click. The number was untraceable. The audio waveform had interference, like overlapping channels, as if 2 recordings had been blended. A background noise analyst identified faint static and what sounded like a drip, regular, rhythmic like a leaky faucet. But sped up, it resembled a pattern, a Morse-like sequence that translated to reset. Detectives reopened the River's Edge property. The building was crumbling, windows shattered, and vines clawed through every crack. In the basement, they found a locked steel cabinet welded shut behind a false wall. With an acetylene torch, they opened it. Inside were dozens of identical frogs. Green, plastic. Hollow. Each one contained a sliver of magnetic tape and a thumb-sized circuit. Experts said they resembled rudimentary memory triggers, like old-fashioned subliminal conditioning devices. Implanted in toys. Meant to be activated. Next to them was a decayed patient chart. Subject 014 A.M. Halberd. Transferred from physician to subject class. Shows sign of reversal. Containment protocol scheduled. It was dated March 20, 1994, exactly 1 week after the mass intake. The theory, unofficial but whispered in closed rooms, is this. Halberd was part of an experiment. Maybe willingly. Maybe not. Something was done to people at River's Edge, something involving memory conditioning, behavioral override, and reset sequences. But it didn't work on everyone. Some patients were released. Some weren't. And some of their children, years later, became receptors, triggers, victims, or worse, vessels. The killings stopped after the 8th Monday. But in 2019, a Seattle antique shop received an anonymous donation box. It contained an old VHS tape labeled Frog_1994. The owner, curious, played it. No images, just audio, breathing, whispers. Then a single line spoken in a deep, distorted voice. The frogs don't choose. They remember. Until someone else forgets. The tape melted in the player. Literally. No heat source, no fire. Just liquid plastic dripping onto the carpet. The toy frogs recovered from the River's Edge basement were turned over to federal authorities. None were ever seen again. 1 night later, the building collapsed during a minor quake. Engineers said it was unfortunate timing. But some Spokane locals claim they still hear something at night. Not voices. Not footsteps. Just the sound of plastic legs tapping across their windowsills. At exactly 2:36 a.m. The Forgotten Jury. Baltimore, Maryland. Summer of 1975. The city was in the middle of one of its most violent decades. The police were overworked, corruption scandals were beginning to bubble under the surface, and the court system was jammed with cases, most mundane, some monstrous, but none stranger than the trial of Henry Mallon. Malin, 46, a quiet, soft-spoken caretaker at an abandoned textile factory, was charged with the murder of 19-year-old Elise Caraway, who had gone missing the previous winter. Her body was discovered in the drainage canal behind the old Baldwin textile mill, frozen in the muddy water, her arms bent unnaturally over her head, her mouth packed with dry leaves. She was barefoot. Her shoes were never found. All eyes turned to Malin. He lived in a small room in the mill's boiler basement. He had no family, no phone, and rarely left the property. He kept thousands of documents and old photographs in neat stacks, none of them labeled, organized only by what he called intuitive chronology. When asked to explain what that meant, he simply said, "Time arranges itself for those who observe without expectation." He claimed he had nothing to do with Elise's death. Claimed he hadn't seen her. That he had no idea how she ended up behind the mill. Still, the circumstantial evidence mounted. Her scarf found under his mattress, her diary hidden behind a loose brick in the boiler room. A neighbor claimed to hear her screaming on the night of her disappearance. The trial began June 2nd. The prosecution presented a tight narrative. Malin lured her, possibly drugged her, killed her during a psychotic break. The defense leaned on lack of physical evidence, and on Malin's erratic, but legally coherent, personality. 12 jurors were selected. Standard procedure. Photographed. Signed in. Monitored. They listened attentively through the first 2 weeks of testimony. They took notes. They asked sharp questions. On June 17th, closing arguments concluded. Judge Avery Chambers instructed the jury to begin deliberations the next morning. But the next morning, none of the jurors showed up. Not a single one. Court officials scrambled to contact them. Calls went unanswered. Deputies were dispatched. What they found sparked a frenzy that would echo through Baltimore's courtrooms for decades. All 12 jurors had disappeared. Not run away. Not absconded. Disappeared. 8 of them had been in their homes the night before. Their beds were slept in. Meals half-eaten. One television was still on. For had children or spouses who said they'd kissed them good night as usual. But by morning, the beds were cold and empty. No signs of struggle. No broken locks. No missing vehicles. One home had security footage, a juror named Anya Wells. It showed her walking from her kitchen to her hallway at 11:34 p.m., yawning. She turns a corner. And never emerges. 3 minutes later, the hallway lights flicker. That was the last frame. Panic spread. The trial collapsed. Malin's defense attorney motioned for a dismissal due to mistrial. The judge, against every instinct, granted it. Henry Malin walked free. He didn't return to the mill. He vanished as well. For 2 years, nothing else came of it. Then, in 1977, a property investor named Clark Mendel bought the old Baldwin Mill with plans to renovate it into a commercial space. During early demolition, workers discovered a sealed concrete room beneath the foundation. It hadn't appeared on any blueprint. Inside, they found 12 theater-style seats bolted to the floor, facing a wall of glass that looked into complete darkness. Each seat had a nameplate. Each nameplate matched a missing juror. There were no fingerprints. No DNA. Just a cassette recorder in the center seat, labeled, "For those who judge." Authorities played the tape. It contained nothing but the sound of pages turning. Constant. Endless. And underneath it, barely audible, voices whispering in unison. Judgment is memory. Memory is rot. Truth decays. The tape melted in the machine after its third playback. No cause determined. The mill was razed completely by order of the city. But the location where the secret room was discovered remains a blacktop lot to this day, undeveloped. Every attempt to build on it has failed. Equipment breaks. Workers quit. Permits vanish from city records. In 1982, the body of juror Anya Wells was discovered, inside a broken chest freezer sold at a thrift store 10 miles from her original home. The store owner had bought it at a state auction. The freezer had been sealed for years. Inside, Anya was perfectly preserved, her hands folded over her chest, a scrap of paper tucked between her fingers. Written in childlike scrawl were the words, "We remembered too much." The case reopened briefly, but no further remains were ever found. As for Malin, he was never officially seen again. But once a year, on the anniversary of Elise Carraway's death, someone places a pair of shoes, small, leather, unworn, on the empty Baldwin Mill lot. And once, in 1994, a photograph was mailed anonymously to the Baltimore County DA's office. It showed 12 people sitting in a theater. Their faces were expressionless, but their eyes were pitch black, like voids had been carved into their skulls. The back of the photo read, "We were not asked to judge. We were asked to forget." To this day, the forgotten jury remains one of the most bizarre cold cases in American legal history. It is studied not just by criminologists and lawyers, but by fringe psychologists, conspiracy theorists, and memory researchers. Some believe Malin's trial was never about guilt or innocence. Some believe the courtroom was merely a stage, one where memory was manipulated, observed, erased. But no one has ever explained why 12 lives were stolen in the night, or how judgment became an act of disappearance. Every case adds a new layer of mystery, leaving more questions than answers. Which one lingers in your mind, and what's your take on what really happened?